My name is Lucas. I'm 27, and if there's one thing I've learned about my family, it's that respect is always conditional. Growing up, I was the quiet kid, the one who never quite fit into the rowdy laughter at family barbecues or the sarcastic banter at reunions. My parents divorced when I was young, and I spent most of my teenage years bouncing between households, never really settling into the family unit that everyone else seemed to prize. Because of that, I was often seen as an outsider, someone they could poke fun at without much consequence. By the time my cousin Daniel's wedding rolled around, I had already built up armor against the little digs and insults. Or at least, I thought I had. The reception was being held in this huge event hall just outside the city, chandeliers glittering, waiters balancing trays of champagne, the whole 9 yards. Everyone was dressed to impress. I had gone out of my way to make sure I looked decent. Navy suit, freshly pressed shirt, shoes polished. For once, I thought maybe I wouldn't stick out like the odd one at the table. But families have a way of reminding you exactly where you stand. It was midway through dinner when it happened. The speeches had wrapped up, glasses were clinking, and conversations were buzzing all around. I was sitting at a long table near the dance floor, across from my Aunt Marjorie. Now, Marjorie has always had this sharpness to her. She's the kind of person who can turn a compliment into an insult before you've even realized what happened. Growing up, she never missed a chance to tell me how I should toughen up or be more like Daniel. Even as an adult, she found ways to undermine me at every gathering. As the music softened and the groom's father stood to toast, Marjorie leaned back in her chair, swirled her wine, and pointed at me. "Don't get too comfortable, Lucas," she said loud enough for our side of the room to hear. "This family will never respect you." The words hung in the air like smoke. There was a beat of silence, then laughter broke out around her. Not the whole room, just the cluster of relatives closest to her. The kind of laughter that cuts deeper because it isn't harmless amusement, it's agreement. My cousin Sarah covered her mouth to hide her smirk. My uncle shook his head with that smug, "She said what we were all thinking" expression. Even people I barely knew chuckled uncomfortably, as though it was safer to join in than to push back. I sat frozen, my fork halfway to my plate. My face flushed hot, and I could feel that familiar tightness in my chest, the one that always comes when you're humiliated in public, but you can't think of a single sharp retort fast enough. Every instinct screamed at me to shrink into my seat, to pretend it didn't matter. But it did. It always had. I forced a smile, but inside, I was seething. I thought, why me? Why always me? I'd worked hard to carve out a life for myself, finished school, held down a steady job, paid my own bills. Yet to them, I was still the awkward kid who never belonged. The laughter was still rippling when the groom's father, Mr. Bennett, stood from his table. He wasn't part of my side of the family. He was Daniel's new father-in-law. A tall man with a calm, commanding presence, he raised his glass. But instead of smiling politely like everyone expected, he set the glass down and fixed his gaze on Marjorie. The room quieted almost instantly. "Marjorie," he said, his voice low but carrying. That was uncalled for, especially tonight. I thought he'd leave it at that, just a mild reprimand to smooth things over. But then he paused, looked around at the faces now frozen in discomfort, and continued. "Since you've chosen to make this personal, perhaps it's time the family knew something personal about you." A ripple of confusion swept through the tables. Marjorie stiffened, her lips parting as if to interrupt, but Mr. Bennett raised a hand. "Do you really think you're in any position to talk about respect?" he asked. His voice wasn't angry, it was almost disappointed. "Because I know exactly what you did. And I don't think everyone here would be laughing if they knew." My heart started pounding. Around me, people exchanged nervous glances. Half the room seemed to lean forward unconsciously, like an audience sensing the start of a drama they hadn't paid for but couldn't turn away from. Marjorie's smirk was gone, replaced by a twitch in her jaw. I had no idea what was coming, but I could feel it, something big, something heavy. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about to blow the whole room open. And then, just as the tension became unbearable, Mr. Bennett looked her dead in the eyes and spoke a single sentence that made several people at our table gasp aloud. Half the room froze. The other half pushed their chairs back in disbelief. And then, as if on cue, people began to rise. Murmurs turned to whispers. Whispers turned to protests. Chairs scraped against the polished floor as relatives gathered their things. Within minutes, nearly half the room had walked out, leaving behind an echo of stunned silence. I sat there, numb, my mind racing, the weight of what I'd just heard pressing down like a stone. And Marjorie, she sat rigid, eyes darting, her face pale as the laughter she once led turned to ashes around her. That was the moment everything changed. But it wasn't the end. Not even close. I couldn't move. My body felt like it was locked in place, even as the air in the reception hall thickened with whispers. Some people still had forks in their hands, hovering halfway to their mouths as though they'd forgotten how to eat. Others looked at Marjorie like she'd just turned into someone they didn't recognize. The words Mr. Bennet had spoken rang in my ears, replaying over and over, each time hitting harder. She's been stealing from her own mother for years. That was it. Simple, direct, but devastating. The gasp that followed was instant. My grandmother, Marjorie's mother, wasn't at the wedding. She'd been too frail to travel, and everyone had just accepted that. But she was still alive, still sharp when she wanted to be, and very much the matriarch of the family. To even suggest Marjorie was taking money from her was unthinkable. And yet, there was Mr. Bennet, standing tall and unflinching, saying it in front of everyone. Marjorie's chair scraped violently against the floor as she stood. "That's a lie," she snapped, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. "How dare you? This is slander." But her eyes told another story. Wide, frantic, searching the faces around her like she was trying to gauge just how much people believed. Mr. Bennet didn't back down. He didn't even raise his voice. "It's not slander when I've seen the bank transfers myself. Do you want me to explain how I came across them? Or would you prefer I bring out the documents tomorrow morning?" You could hear a pin drop. Even the waitstaff had paused, trays wobbling slightly in their hands as they pretended to busy themselves nearby. I glanced at Sarah, my cousin who had laughed at Marjorie's comment earlier. Her smirk was gone. Now she looked sick, like she wanted to meld into her seat. My uncle's face had turned beet red, though whether it was from anger or embarrassment, I couldn't tell. Marjorie shook her head rapidly, her hair swaying with each movement. "You don't know what you're talking about. This is none of your business. None of it." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she slammed her hand down on the table. But the damage was already spreading. From the far end of the table, one of my older cousins muttered, "Wait, is that why Grandma couldn't afford her caretaker last year?" Another voice piped up, sharper. "She told me she had to cancel her physical therapy. Said money was tight. But Grandma's pension is more than enough for her expenses." The whispers turned into pointed questions, murmured accusations darting across the room like sparks catching dry grass. I sat there, still frozen, but my chest was no longer tight with humiliation. Instead, a strange sense of vindication started creeping in, slow and unfamiliar. For once, the spotlight wasn't on me as the outsider, the easy target. It was on Marjorie, and she was crumbling. But even as I felt that small flicker of relief, I couldn't ignore the unease. If what Mr. Bennet said was true, if Marjorie had been draining Grandma's savings, how long had it been happening? And why would he, of all people, know about it? Marjorie's voice rose again, shrill now, desperate. "This is a wedding. You're ruining my nephew's wedding with these lies." She jabbed a finger toward Mr. Bennet. "You're just trying to turn this family against me because you." "Because I what?" Mr. Bennet cut in, his tone suddenly sharp enough to slice through her words. "Because I had the decency to protect an old woman when no one else bothered to check on her. Your mother trusted you, Marjorie. She trusted you with her accounts, her power of attorney. And you've been bleeding her dry for years." The color drained from Marjorie's face completely. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out this time. I glanced at Daniel, the groom. His smile was long gone, his hands gripping the edge of the table. His new wife looked at him nervously, whispering something in his ear. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It had turned into a tribunal. Then, as if the weight of it all had suddenly hit them at once, people began standing. Not quietly, not discreetly. They stood with anger in their movements, chairs scraping loudly as though to punctuate the betrayal. My cousin Amelia shook her head and muttered, "I can't even look at you." She walked out, dragging her husband with her. A cluster of others followed, whispering furiously as they left. Marjorie's eyes darted to me then, just for a second, and in that second, I saw something I'd never seen before: fear. Genuine, bone-deep fear. And that's when it hit me. All those years of jabs, of undermining me, of treating me like I was beneath everyone else. It wasn't just cruelty for its own sake. It was projection. She had been hiding something, building a wall of insults to distract from the cracks in her own life. And now, that wall was coming down brick by brick. But the night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Mr. Bennet wasn't finished. He had set the fire, but I could see it in his eyes. He was about to pour gasoline on it. He leaned forward slightly, voice steady, and said, "Shall I tell them where the money really went, Marjorie? Or would you like to explain it yourself?" The room froze again, every eye turning back to her. And I sat there, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. Because whatever was about to come next wasn't just going to shake her world, it was going to change mine, too. Marjorie's lips trembled as though she wanted to speak, but no words came out. Her eyes darted from one side of the room to the other, searching for an ally, someone, anyone, who would step in and deflect the heat away from her. But the faces that had once laughed at her cruel jokes about me were now cold, rigid, and filled with suspicion. Mr. Bennet stood still, a pillar of control in the chaos he had unleashed. He didn't shout, he didn't flail, he simply waited. That quiet patience seemed to make the air even heavier, pressing down on everyone in the hall. People wanted answers. They weren't going to leave without them. Finally, Marjorie's brother, my Uncle Raymond, cleared his throat. His voice was hesitant, but it carried. "Marjorie, is this true? Did you take from Mom?" That single question seemed to crush her. Her shoulders slumped, but she quickly forced them back up again, like a puppet jerking on strings. "Of course not," she barked. "This is all nonsense. Lies. You think I would ever steal from my own mother?" But then Mr. Bennet leaned forward slightly, resting his hand on the back of the nearest chair. "Then perhaps you'd like me to explain the wire transfers. The ones to that account in your name in Palm Beach. Transfers that matched the exact withdrawals from your mother's savings." The words hit like thunder. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the clink of a dropped fork somewhere in the back. Palm Beach. It was so specific, so concrete. It couldn't have been fabricated on the spot. Everyone knew Marjorie vacationed in Florida regularly, always posting pictures of beachside condos, expensive dinners, and luxury boutiques. She had always brushed it off as just treating myself, claiming she worked hard enough to deserve it. But now, the picture painted itself too clearly. Sarah, who had been trying to stay quiet since her earlier smirk, suddenly hissed. "That's where you got the money for that car, isn't it? The one you said was a gift from a friend." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the room like glass. Marjorie's face went pale. "Sarah, you don't understand." "No, I understand perfectly," Sarah snapped, rising from her chair. "You've been bleeding Grandma dry while we've been covering her bills. Do you know how much I've put on my credit card to make sure she had what she needed?" The room erupted with murmurs again, angrier this time. No longer whispers of curiosity, but sharp accusations tumbling over one another. I sat still, almost detached, like I was watching a storm sweep through the hall. For years I had been the target of their disdain, but tonight, it wasn't me under the microscope. It was her. The woman who had made my life miserable at every family gathering was unraveling in front of everyone, thread by thread. And yet, even as I watched, I couldn't help but feel a complicated twist in my chest. A part of me wanted to revel in it, to enjoy the poetic justice. But another part whispered that I was now sitting in the middle of something that would splinter the family for good. Mr. Bennet didn't let up. "Would you like me to explain what you told the real estate agent when you bought that condo? Or should I repeat the line you used? Family money, inheritance in advance." Marjorie's eyes widened, and she stumbled back a step. You have no right." The groom, Daniel, finally stood up, his face pale but his voice firm. "Aunt Marjorie, is it true? Did you use Grandma's money to buy property?" The words came from him like a final nail. Because Daniel was her golden child, the one she always held up as a shining example, the one she never failed to compare me against. For him to ask, to demand the truth, cut deeper than any stranger's judgment could. Marjorie opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked cornered, desperate, like a fox caught in a snare. Her hands trembled at her sides, her carefully composed facade slipping into fragments. And then Mr. Bennet delivered the blow. Calm, precise, devastating. She took over $200,000 from her mother's accounts. I've seen the documents. And unless she wants me to provide them here and now, I suggest she stop pretending this is anything other than what it is. The reaction was immediate. Gasps, angry shouts, people rising from their chairs. Half the room surged with indignation, while the other half simply sat in stunned silence, as though the ground had shifted beneath their feet. I could barely breathe. 200,000. My grandmother's money. Money she had likely trusted Marjorie to manage for her care and well-being. And suddenly, I remembered, last Thanksgiving, when Grandma had mentioned she couldn't afford a certain medical treatment. I had brushed it off as exaggeration, assuming maybe insurance hadn't covered it. But now it all made sense. Marjorie's face twisted with fury. "You don't know what you're talking about," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You're trying to ruin me, to humiliate me on this night." But no one was buying it anymore. The air had shifted. The respect she had commanded through fear and manipulation was gone, replaced by contempt. And then she did something none of us expected. Her eyes snapped to me. "This is your fault," she spat, pointing a trembling finger in my direction. "You've always wanted to tear me down. You put him up to this." The accusation hit me like a slap. I blinked, stunned, as dozens of eyes turned toward me. For a moment, the humiliation I thought I'd escaped came rushing back. My throat tightened, and heat rushed to my face. But before I could even open my mouth, Mr. Bennett spoke again, his voice like steel. "Don't drag him into this, Marjorie. He's got nothing to do with your choices. This is all on you." And in that moment, the divide in the family widened into a chasm. Some stood, angry and disgusted, heading toward the exit. Others stayed rooted in place, their faces pale with shock. The wedding had stopped being a celebration. It had become a reckoning. And I realized this was only the beginning. Because if Mr. Bennett had exposed this much already, there had to be more. Much more. When Marjorie pointed her finger at me and accused me of setting this up, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. For a split second, I thought maybe people would believe her, that after all these years of being the family scapegoat, I would once again take the fall for something I had no part in. My heart hammered in my chest. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, weighing, judging, waiting. But then Mr. Bennett's words cut through the tension like a knife. "No, Marjorie. He had nothing to do with this. Stop deflecting. This is about you and only you." The certainty in his tone pulled the spotlight right back onto her. The finger she had jabbed in my direction trembled, then dropped slowly back to her side. Her lips twisted into something between a sneer and a grimace, but she didn't dare push the lie any further. She knew the tide had turned, and it was crashing down on her. My cousin Sarah, her voice sharp with fury, stood up again. "Do you have any idea how betrayed we feel right now? Grandma trusted you. We all trusted you." She was shaking with anger, tears brimming in her eyes. "I've been putting my own money toward her medical bills. And all that time, you were living it up in Florida?" The words seemed to ignite the room. One after another, voices rose in anger. My uncle Raymond shouted, "You always acted holier than thou, but look at you now." Someone else muttered loudly, "Thief." Marjorie tried to yell over them, but her voice cracked, growing shrill and panicked. "You don't understand. I needed it. I deserved it after everything I've done for this family." That sentence landed like a slap. Needed it? Deserved it? The family she had spent years belittling and controlling. The same family who had bent over backward to keep Grandma comfortable. This was her justification? Daniel, the groom, slammed his hands down on the table, the sound echoing through the hall. His face was pale with fury. "Enough. Aunt Marjorie, you ruined my wedding. Do you even realize what you've done? This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and now it's nothing but a spectacle because of your lies." His voice cracked, and you could tell the betrayal hit him harder than anyone else. He had always been her favorite, her prized nephew, the one she bragged about endlessly. Now even he had turned against her. Marjorie's eyes widened, and for the first time, she seemed to falter. Her golden boy had spoken, and it wasn't in her defense. Mr. Bennett, calm as ever, took a step forward. "Daniel, I'm sorry your day was interrupted, but this needed to come out. People needed to know. And if I hadn't said it tonight, how much longer would your grandmother have suffered in silence?" No one spoke against him. Not one person. Marjorie collapsed back into her chair, her hands shaking. The image of control she had always cultivated, flawless hair, perfect makeup, smug smile was shattered. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. That's when Raymond pulled out his phone. He scrolled for a second, then looked up with a grim expression. I'm calling Mom. She deserves to know what's going on right now. Marjorie's head shot up. No, don't you dare. But it was too late. He put the phone on speaker, and after a few rings, my grandmother's frail but steady voice filled the room. Hello, Mom, Raymond said, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. Did you give Marjorie permission to take money from your accounts? To use your savings for herself? There was silence on the other end. Then, softly, no. I trusted her to help me with bills. Not this. The weight of that admission was crushing. My grandmother's voice cracked, full of sorrow. Marjorie, how could you? Tears welled up in Marjorie's eyes, and for a moment, I thought she might finally admit it. But instead, she doubled down, her voice shrill and desperate. I did it for us. For the family. You wouldn't understand. None of you ever understand what I've sacrificed. The room exploded. Voices shouting, accusations flying. Half the guests stormed out in disgust, muttering about calling the police, about cutting ties, about how they would never forgive her. The other half stayed, too stunned to move, as if rooted to their chairs by the sheer shock of it all. I just sat there, numb, watching it unfold. All those years of being the target of her scorn, the outsider mocked and belittled, it had all led to this moment. And yet, instead of triumph, I felt something heavier. Sadness, maybe, or the recognition that nothing would ever be the same again. The night unraveled quickly after that. The DJ cut the music. The waitstaff exchanged nervous glances as they continued to serve plates to tables now half empty. Daniel tried to salvage what was left, but you could see it in his eyes. His wedding day had been ruined. Not by chance, not by circumstance, but by the actions of someone he had once admired. As for Marjorie, she fled. She stormed out of the hall, her heels clicking furiously against the polished floor, her shoulders rigid. No one followed her, not even her husband. The rest of us sat in silence for a long while. Eventually, people began to trickle out, one by one, still muttering in disbelief. By the end of the night, only a small circle remained. Daniel and his bride, Sarah, Uncle Raymond, and me. We sat together, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Finally, Sarah turned to me. Lucas, she said quietly, I'm sorry. I frowned. For what? For laughing earlier. For not taking you seriously. For letting her get away with it for so long. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You didn't deserve any of it. None of us did. I swallowed hard, unable to find words. Mr. Bennett approached then, his expression heavy but resolute. I'll be filing the paperwork tomorrow. The authorities will handle the rest. Your grandmother will be protected. He placed a hand on my shoulder. And as for you, Lucas, don't ever let people like her make you think you don't belong. Tonight proved you do. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift. Marjorie's accounts were frozen. Legal proceedings began almost immediately, spearheaded by Raymond and backed by nearly everyone else in the family. Grandma's care was secured, her finances placed in safer hands. And Marjorie? She became a ghost. No one heard from her for weeks, until word spread that she had fled Florida, trying to sell off the condo before it was seized. But it was too late. The law caught up with her. For me, the strangest part was how the family's treatment of me shifted overnight. People who had once dismissed me suddenly wanted to talk, to apologize, to include me. It was awkward at first. I wasn't used to being respected by them. But slowly, I began to accept it. And yet, I'll never forget that night. The night my aunt pointed at me, sneered that I would never be respected, and laughed with half the family behind her. The night that same family walked out on her instead. Because in the end, respect isn't something you demand by tearing others down. It's something you earn by how you live. And Marjorie had lost it all.